introductions first and see if anyone joins in the meantime. Jenna, I know that you're new on the call this time, and I would butcher your last name. So do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. It's Juba. I'm Jenna Juba. I'm from Central Health. Jenna Lloyd recently left us, and I have taken part of her responsibility on. So rather than refill the CNIO role immediately, I was bumped up to Senior Director of Nursing Quality and Informatics, and I have been working under her for a while. So just trying to transition in and fill in the gaps for things I don't already know about. So just working our way through here and catching up, getting up to speed.
Nice to meet you, and nice to have you join. And I'm so glad I didn't try to say, so it's Zuba.
That works. I answer to a lot of things, to be honest. Around Centra, I was just kind of like Madonna for a while. It was just Jenna because nobody wanted to approach it. And then when Jenna Lloyd came on, it became Jenna D and Jenna L. So,
well, welcome to the group. Kate, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes. My name is Katie Atwood, or Kate, people call me. I do work under Holly Ellison for Concord Hospital, and just joining the group to get more exposure to transit and see what other organizations are doing in transit as well.
Okay.
So, but I am under the testing coordinator role, so I work primarily in transit. So, for Concord Hospital.
You're welcome to join and participate in these meetings, but we don't talk a lot about transit at all in this forum. This is more about Cerner functionality and what challenges people are having, or exciting and new things they're doing and successes they're having. But yeah. You're welcome to join. I don't know that transit comes up much in our conversations here, though. So you're welcome to listen in, and if you decide you want to keep joining, you're more than welcome to. But if you find that it's not of value to you, then we do have the monthly meetings for transit as well, and they're on the third Friday of the month, and we go over new topics for transit at that time. Are you on those calls?
I am.
Okay.
Yep. Yes,
okay.
And that would be great. And I am getting, I do work hand in hand with Cerner as well. So just trying to get more exposure with Cerner and see what I can do there as my role's expanding. So, but yeah, so I will definitely just listen and see what I can take in.
Okay. Holly had said she was going to join, but maybe she's having difficulty. I know she was going to be driving in the car. So I think we'll go ahead and get started. The first topic that I'm going to bring up is the time of the meeting. So we have some days great attendance on this call and other days not. And I know we originally were going around the noon time, and at the time people had said that was challenging. And so we did move the meeting to this time. I don't know that it's been that much more successful being at this time. And so I just wanted to ask people how they felt about the 7 a.m. time, if that was still what the group felt was appropriate.
Morning, Patty. It's Kim Ramirez. How are you?
I'm excellent. How are you?
I'm okay. The 7 o'clock, there is no good time. So from my perspective, sometimes I can get here, the 7 a.m. is early, but, sometimes I can get here, sometimes I can't. So at this point, I think it's a matter of making it a priority, regardless of when it is, from my perspective, at least.
Yeah. And again, like, some of the conversations we've had have been so great. So I don't want to move it again and have it be less well attended. But at the same time, I want to make sure that people truly are able to attend. Does the group feel then that we should stick with this time? I mean, it's every other month. So you're right. It's making a commitment and, making sure that the topics are meaningful for all of you.
Hi, this is Tina. I'm kind of like Kim. No time is good time for me. So if the group needed to move it, because I'm on the East Coast, so 7 a.m. is okay for me. But those of anyone who's on the West Coast, makes it a very early morning for them at 6 or even earlier.
Yeah, and that is the other reason I brought it up. Now, they didn't join today, but 2 people asked to join the group that are from North Kansas City Hospital. And so obviously for them, that's 6 a.m. So since they didn't join, what do people feel about me reaching out to them and asking if it was the time? And if that is what stopped people from joining, to maybe poll the group via email to get a new choice of time.
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
That seems
Sounds
reasonable to
good.
me. I'd want that leeway if I were the 6 a.m. team.
Okay, so I will send out a email to the group afterwards with a, I don't know if everyone can do polling via Outlook when it's outside your organization, so maybe I'll just send it out for people to send me back responses with a couple of choices of time. Okay. Long before COVID, I believe we had a conversation about IPOCs and their use, and Tina had mentioned that they had been cited by DNV for their use of IPOCs and what they were doing, and they had done some corrective actions to get around what they'd been cited for. And so we had asked Tina if she'd be willing to present on that. And I really do think it was right before COVID hit that we first started talking about it. So I'm happy that Tina's on today and that she is going to go ahead with her presentation. Just as everybody knows, all times, I am recording it and the video will be available on our website afterwards. And Tina, if you are going to do a PowerPoint presentation, if it's okay with you, I would like to post that along with it.
Sure. I will be glad to. I'm going to share your screen.
Yep.
If you don't mind, but absolutely I will share it. And anything else, I'm all about sharing and with other organizations because I appreciate it when anybody shares with me. So I'm Tina Stamper. I'm in West Virginia. In Charleston, West Virginia, and people frequently get us mixed up with Charleston, South Carolina. I probably should put West Virginia after there so they would know. But I'm a nursing practice director at here at our organization. I've worked here for 30 years. And long road to get where I'm at today, but I won't bore you with all of that. This is a presentation that I've done for a couple of different people for a couple of different places. So I did put in here information about like the size of our hospital, what do we cover, and actually this will be updated because this whole section here of our state, we just merged with them. So we are going to be covering, will be eventually a healthcare delivery system known by Vandalia Health, but that just happened September 1st. So this is a little bit of an outdated slide now. But anyway, we had a very hard journey when we switched over to Cerner. We started in 2016. Prior to us utilizing Cerner, we used Sorian, and we were a beta site for Sorian. So we grew everything and we customized everything. So we made it to where it was very functional for us, and it was very. It worked out very well for our organization as we were DNV for our IPOCs. But when we switched over to Cerner, it was very challenging for us because it was so different. It's not that it didn't include the components that we needed to satisfy the requirements. It's we weren't able to put hard stops and pop-up windows that all the nurses were very much used to. We had a lot of actionable alerts that happened that they did them right from the screen. So to incorporate this into a daily process versus having these pop-ups in their process was very challenging for them. So we got hit right away when they came to visit us with a citing in 2015. So we did the first one for our nonconformities. We got hit with an NC2, and then it was resolved with some of the work that we had done. But then in 2019, when they came back, they hit us again, and they escalated it to an NC1. And really, there was different. I'm going to go through the different things of why we got re-hit with it again. and until we've been continuing our monitoring. And we've been very fortunate that since we've had our resolution in 2020, we have not been recited. Hopefully we have our large survey where we have like 15 surveyors that will be here in January. So hopefully that we will be maintaining our good standing with them, because the IPOCs are never easy to resolve. So in 2017, we had a team leader that was assigned. It was our director of nursing. It was a person that was before me. There was no team created. She just kind of worked with her educators. There was nothing really done with any education. They really focused on nursing and not other disciplines. So when you don't include all your disciplines with your IPOCs, it can be very detrimental, because it is intended for all disciplines to use. And there really wasn't a well-designed action plan. We're a Six Sigma organization, so generally we're supposed to have all these DMAICs put together, and it really was just, this is what we're going to do. When DMV came back, we kind of cherry-picked our charts, and we were able to resolve. And I know that we cherry-picked our charts because I was a part of that. I was a frontline nurse at the time, and I had a whole list of charts that I knew that were well, and when they asked us for them, we just pulled those. So that's always one way to get your way around in DMV, not the right way, but that's what we did at the time. And in 2018, when they came, they looked at all of our charts that we had prepared for them, and there was no further follow-up at the time. And we really didn't monitor it to make sure that we wouldn't get hit again. So in 2019, we got hit with our NC1, our nonconformity 1. So we did create a team, and we did have a team that was on our corrective action plan. We did our full, we use the DMAIC as the Six Sigma process of your design, measure, analyze, your interventions, and your control. We did a current state workflow and developed a future state workflow. We reviewed policies, procedures, state and federal guidelines, and our NIHO standards. That was probably our biggest thing that we needed to follow, because we needed to have all that information to get our nurses to buy in, because the nurses are the ones who touch it every day. Not all disciplines do, but in our organization, the nurses are the ones who manage the IPOC every day. So even though all your disciplines feed into it, because we're here 24/7 as a nurse, we wanted to make sure that we provided that information to the nursing staff so that they would find value to it and not just be another checkoff list. Then we developed our future state workflow. And then, of course, we reviewed and updated all of our education, because we really recognized in the previous nonconformity, we didn't update anything. And it was just very bland education, and they really didn't understand what the icons meant and how the functionality was, because in our previous system, we didn't have the ability to pull documentation into your IPOC. And with having that here, it was very valuable. And when we went back and looked at it, we did not have a lot of indicators that was really beneficial to the nurses making the decisions to met and not met. So this was our DMAIC that we did to start out with. Of course, it's very small, and if you want to blow it up to read all of it, but we wanted to have a systematic way of process improvement. Instead of just, oh, this person's going to do this person's going to do that. This kept us on track and what were our goals going to be and by when. So this is one of our policies here. We didn't have a workflow included with that, and the workflow that we all thought was happening didn't match the policy, because it was actually the old workflow from our previous EHR. So we did look at a lot of the model workflows, because you definitely want to make sure that you are as close to model as you can be. We really didn't do anything else to compare it to, but we started with this one. So when we were doing the review of the workflows, we wanted to analyze each piece of it. We wanted to look at what suggests your IPOCs. And I'm not sure how, how familiar everybody is with what the IPOCs are, but you do have multiple avenues of suggesting it. You can have the system suggested just based on your PSO. You can have it suggested based on your documentation, or you can have it suggested from specific DRG codes. And that has been very beneficial, knowing that we could suggest things from ICD-10 codes. And I'll go into that in a little bit. We wanted to review the initiating piece of it, because initiating piece of it's a little bit different than just managing it. We wanted to review how does everybody manage it, because everyone should be managing it the same way, regardless what discipline you are. Same way with initiating. Adding to phases, that was not something that we did very often. We've actually expanded that a great deal since we really learned how beneficial phases work, because phases work very similar to initiating your sub-phases of a power plan. We only had one, and that was a model content for pressure injuries, and we started using that for other things. Discontinuing and resolving, boy, we were not good at that at all, and we still do struggle with that when a patient leaves, because it was the culture in our organization from the very beginning. Like I said, I've worked here for 30 years. It was always the assumption that your IPOCs are resolved because the patient has left the hospital. And that really isn't Cerner's perspective. And if you really think about it, the plan of care really does belong to the patient. It doesn't belong to the hospital. So the plan of care should continue on into an ambulatory space, and when they come back into the inpatient world. We are not very good about using, that's something, our ambulatory space is booming right now. We have more than 70 clinics that have joined our healthcare delivery system. We have more that are continuing to join, and we don't have currently a good way to connect that. We were hoping that one plan would eventually be rolled out, but I don't know actually where that is at the moment. But this is why we struggle with discontinuing and resolving, because nobody finds any value with it, because they always restart it when they come back in the hospital. So this is a big issue for us still as we continue. And our surveyors have not ever focused on whether you're discontinuing or resolving it. They just want to know how you're managing it and initiating it in the organization. Suggesting an IPOC, I already kind of went over this. These are the 3 different ways that you can suggest these. For initiating an IPOC, what we found in the beginning is people really didn't understand what a goal was, an indicator, interventions, and problems. One of the issues that we found is, as a nurse, it's backwards when you think about nursing diagnosis. Generally, that's on top when you think about and maybe it's because I'm an old school nurse, and we have many old school nurses in our organization. When you know that a patient has an issue, generally for nursing, it was a nursing diagnosis, that would be your top thing, because you're building your goals and your interventions off of that, and you also want your outcomes. And we never really used goals as our term before. We utilized outcomes. So we had to retrain the way the nurses were thinking, that when you have something that's suggested, that's what your IPOC is titled, and then you start right away with your goals. Then you have your documentation that you pick for your indicators, and you have your interventions, and then at the very bottom is your problem that you need to select. We did not have our problems pre-selected, and we made a decision amongst our organization. If you had one problem, it was pre-selected, so nurses would not, or even any other discipline, would forget to add the problem, because that needs to go to the problem list. And if there was 2, then they would need to make that decision. We have looked at some of our charts recently, because I knew I was going to be presenting this. We seem to be on the ones that we have more than one goal are missing, so we might change that to pre-selecting our most common ones, and then they would have the ability to deselect or check more if they need it, because we are finding a gap in that. Always seem after you implement something, it seems like you always have to go back and keep re-updating to keep on your process improvements. So initiating an IPOC, this is kind of what one of ours looks like. So this particular one, we tried to minimize the goals. We try not to have more than 3. Actually, we try to keep just 1 or 2. All of our IPOCs have to have a patient-stated specific goal. We keep that in there because your patient is supposed to be a part of your plan of care, and that gives them the ability to, when the patients do want to have a specific goal, then they can pre-select it and add the goal into there. And that helps demonstrate that we've asked the patient what they want. What we found most of the time when we implemented it, we originally had it pre-selected. We deselected it because majority of the patients already were okay with the goals that were there. So we were having goals out there, and this patient stated goal is not easy. You have to double click on it. Then you have to type in all of your information. Most of the nurses were just checking it, and then it would just say patient stated specific goal, and there was nothing typed behind it. So that's why we just deselected it, because we were concerned not having the patients stated in there. People were not documenting it. We would like an easier way to do that, but it's not easy currently. We deselected it. So the indicators are your icons there that look like a graph. And we chose specific, those can be labs, they can be specific DTAs from documentation to be pulled over, or specific, your vital signs, things like that. So we chose these specific ones for the GU status if it was altered, to be pulled forward. And that helps the nurses or any other discipline make the decision of met or not met with their goals. Interventions, we always put a ton of interventions that are independent of any provider order. So we try to not put things inside of the interventions that a physician would order. That's how we tried to minimize the interventions. If there were things to consider consults, we would put those in there as well. What we have learned is we can make these actionable. In the beginning, they weren't, but now we're able to, with the initiation of your IPOC, we can now send tasks to nurses so that they can complete some of these interventions on a daily basis, or however you want to, or you need to have those tasks sent. And any of our tasks that we sent, we try very hard not to have a done, not done. It needs to be actionable. We had a whole bunch of done, not done tasks, and that doesn't really mean a lot when you go back and look and then somebody didn't go do their documentation correctly. So we always try to do that. And as you can see here, this was one of them when I took the screenshot of this a few years ago. We forgot to have a pre-selected down here because it only has one problem list. So if I just came in here and initiated it, this would be very small and I would have forgotten the problem list. I kind of wanted to leave that on here to show how easy that is to forget it, because it is at the bottom. Using phased IPOCs was really, really a very good thing for us. So if you have a problem that you have, for example, skin integrity, it may not be altered at the moment, or it may be altered skin integrity, and later on, if it becomes a pressure injury, then they would go on ahead and initiate the phased approach. Because not every patient, hopefully every patient doesn't come in with a pressure injury. You only would have to activate it at the point of when the patient acquires it. Phased is to prevent a lot of duplication of goals, indicators, and interventions, because one of the things that we found as well, when you have a lot of goals that are the same in other plans of care, especially if it's duplicating, the nurses have to click more on interventions, they have to see more. So we tried to minimize it so that they wouldn't have to do too much in the IPOC and just be able to view it, review it, and check mark it, and not have to do excessively clicks, because we do monitor how many clicks. What we found is that all nurses love to count clicks, so that's one of the things we don't like to add to them. So here, this is kind of what, if you all don't use phased IPOCs, this is kind of one that looks like. This is a newer one that we wasn't a part of model, but what we had decided to add, because what we found is that there were a lot of people not utilizing the altered blood glucose the way it should be. Really, the blood glucose was mostly for just monitoring if somebody was on your point of care testing. And we really wanted to have something that called out diabetes management, because there's more than just blood glucose monitoring. For example, you could have someone who's post-surgery, but they add a physician puts point of care testing on there because of the fight or flight response. You could be monitoring it because of that. Diabetes is a whole different ball game, and we wanted to add a few more interventions and goals for that patient. So if your patient wasn't diabetic, you didn't need to see all of these interventions, but if they were, the expectation is you would initiate your blood glucose first, because you are going to have some type of a power plane that's going to go along with that, and then the diabetes management would have that as well. So this is what a few of the things that had for the blood glucose for that there. And then here is the subphase that we added many more things. One of the things that we did, we pre-selected is, so if you have a temperature that you're taking with this because you want to know what their temperature is and you want to see it inside of your plan of care, we pre-selected all of them, because it's only going to pull over exactly which route you're taking. But we found that not everybody is taking it the right in certain things, because if you have a temporal artery, that is our preferred. But if you do take it axillary, or if you are taking it rectal, then it will pull forward, and the nurse won't have to go back here and add it later on. So we just pre-selected all of the indicators, and you'll see that in almost all of our IPOCs. It makes it look like it's messy when you're initiating it, but in the end, it really makes it beneficial for the nurses. And then here's our interventions at the bottom. And then you can see we didn't add more to the problems, because the problems would have already been here. Hopefully they would have selected the right one. So this is kind of what our current state works. So we can't always use the model, the workflows. We have to put them in our formats that the nurses can, or other disciplines can read. So we ended up having our future state workflows for what we were having. The management, we kind of called it out a little bit more. Education updated. We included all of our policies and procedures. We wanted to include the interdisciplinary planning, interdisciplinary care planning process. It was really important when we had our team that we included people from respiratory. We included all of our speech people, speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, cardiac rehab. We included all of them, and we actually included some of our comorbidity teams, because the comorbidity teams helped us determine which ICD-10 codes we were going to suggest. So we have our CHF and our COPD teams. They gave us the top ones to suggest the plan of care when it came to our COPD patients, when it came to our AMI patients and things like that. So that we wanted to make sure they were all a part of it. Our dietitians were a part of it as well. We also included our regulatory compliance officers, because we definitely wanted to make sure we were staying on track with anything that DMV and the NIHO standards would have there available. So we wanted to make sure everybody knew how to create and initiate the IPOCs. How are they suggested, the requirements, the steps to initiating it, managing it, and discontinuing and resolving it. Because we didn't include all of that in the education, we knew in the beginning when we did the education, that was a long journey for us as well, because they wanted us to put things on our learning management system to where people could just read it and do it. And what we found, we didn't get much better with it within the year that we had to resolve our nonconformity. So we ended up having in training sessions where they came to a classroom and they were able to suggest it and do it themselves. We had them repeat it over and over again 2 or 3 times, and we would suggest, we would have multiple plans suggested when they came from the ICD codes, from having new patients and things like that. So they would be able to see how it works. That was much more beneficial than it was by putting a PowerPoint out on our LMS system and them just saying that they did it. Monitoring for compliance. In the beginning, we had to monitor it pretty weekly, then monthly. And now that we have a lot better compliance, we do have to monitor this manually. We haven't been able to, we have not been able to figure out a report that can capture it. It is a lot of components for us to be able to capture it. Our state guideline is that something has to be initiated within 24 hours admission. Most of our patients have it initiated within the first 2 to 4 hours, but that is the guideline. And we were able to build a report for that to have, because we, according to our guidelines, we just have to have at least one. So we do have a report to be able to look at that. And we did have to take a look at how are our plans of care looked at in the ambulatory ED and procedural plans of care. And those generally are managed by our physician orders. We have things screening in place, but we don't have something that they go and document on, because it is the expectation that the physician is managing it. While the physician does manage the entire plan of care in the inpatient world, that's how nurses and other disciplines are able to show what they're doing for the patients in the inpatient world. The problems that we encountered, COVID, of course, did not help us at all. We were fortunate that we did have a COVID model content that was given to us early on, and we implemented that. The ICD-10 comorbidity codes, that's been very useful, and we're still working on adding more codes to suggest our IPOCs. We still have continued staff confusion. They still don't always understand how met, not met works. We tried to eliminate some of the things that you do have other abilities to say you're progressing. When we added that, they were completely confused with it. We thought it would be a better thing because you're progressing until you have met or not met something, and they didn't like that. So we had to change it back to met or not met. And we, as I've spoke about already, the ambulatory space and resolving discontinuing problems we've had issues with. And that's all I have.
Thanks very much, Tina. Does anybody have any questions for Tina?
No questions, but thank you. That was good to see. We actually just did a big project with our IPOCs as well. And the gentleman who led that project, Friday was his last day. Otherwise, I would have been calling him like, I need you to listen in on this, because we definitely still have work to do. So you've given me some ideas. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any comments or questions from anyone else? Okay, thank you again, Tina. Now we'll move on to the open discussion part of the roundtable today. Does anyone have any specific topics that they would like to bring up or discuss? Very quiet group this time.
I'm day 2 back from vacation, so I don't even realize I'm working yet.
So if there aren't any topics that anyone wanted to bring up this time, why don't we move on then to look at future agenda items. On the list that was included with the agenda from previous meetings, Tina, you had suggested discussing workflow improvements for start-stop for capturing infusion charges. Have you guys resolved that since, or is that still something that you'd like to hear from other people on?
I'm sorry, I didn't, the charges, I'm sorry, I need a refresher on what I was.
I'm not sure. It says, so remembering that Brian took these notes. So it's workflow improvements for capturing infusion charges.
We are, I might actually be able to present something. We are working on that and almost ready to implement it. So maybe in the future I could present what we have, unless other people are having that issue. We did determine some end pages, how we could capture it. But if anybody has anything that they have a solid process, I would love to see it, to see if what we're putting into place is going to be working or not.
So that was, so the last time you didn't have a process in place. So this was months ago, right? And you had asked, so, but now you're almost ready to go live with a new process?
Yes. We had to do a lot of research to get where we're at. So yeah, so
Okay.
if it's not valuable to anybody else, I don't need it anymore.
Is that something that the group would be interested in a presentation on, or is everybody good with capturing charges from infusion?
Patty, it's Kim. So here in Canada, it's not the capturing of charges is not that critical. But anything that has a workflow, a new workflow associated with an M page, I'm often interested in learning, because it sometimes, you know, peaks a possibility in another space sometimes. So I don't know if that's true of this example, but that would be the way I would look at something like this.
Are you using M pages, Tina?
Yeah. We use the admission for, and I'm referring to nursing M pages. We use the admission, the handoff, and the discharge M pages.
So, and I do think that although the charges aren't important in Canada, I think the reason it was a problem for you, Tina, is because the workflow was cumbersome for nursing anyway, right? So you probably would be interested in whatever workflow improvements they came up with, Kim.
Absolutely.
Okay. Another topic that was suggested for future meetings was blood administration with Bridge, and it was Jenna Lloyd who had suggested that. Is that something that you guys were struggling with at Centra, Jenna, or does anybody remember what the discussion was around Bridge?
Yeah, that's been something that has been I think, thorn in the side since we went live with Cerner. We're actually kicking off I guess, a kickoff to sort of look at those processes and what we've got going on next week. Cerner's actually coming to town, and we're doing 3 days of meeting and mapping and working that through. So down the line, I may have something for you on that. But that was previously definitely Jenna Lloyd's infant and not mine. So I'm still getting caught up on that one.
Okay, so as opposed to a roundtable topic, that might be something that you might present for us in the future.
Yeah, or if anyone has any thoughts on work that they have done as I'm walking into it, I'll take that too. I'm not picky.
Um, Other items were meds rec. And using SMEs and chain nurses for education. These other ones didn't have names beside them, so I don't know specifically what people were wanting to discuss. And management of clinical decision reports and reminders. Are there any topics that people would like to see added to the list of future agenda items?
Something that sparked my interest was knowing we have a transit expert on the line. And the reason why, if Kate wouldn't mind, I don't know, we use transit. I don't know that we develop our scripts as detailed as they should be. We have an upgrade that's coming, and we're trying to look at those, and we're adding a whole bunch of SMEs. I don't know if anyone else would be interested to know, how do you guys manage your transit scripts from doing your upgrades? I think we definitely, our organization could do better.
I would agree. I reached out to Sam Buckner the other day saying I was really worried, Tina. You have somebody helping now with testing who wanted to take out a lot of the detail that we painstakingly put in.
Yeah, and what's unfortunate is that it has happened that people are taking out steps. And, you know, testing is the most, and now that we have just went live with ClearVia, I have to have those detailed steps in there. So any suggestions on how I can write guidelines so it's set in stone that this is the process that we will follow, I would really appreciate that.
Well, it's a topic near and dear to my heart, that's for sure.
So are we talking about workflows with it, or are we talking about managing the scripts, or are we talking about like what?
So let me take a stab, and you tell me if I'm close, Tina. So CAMC went live with Transit many years ago, and at the time, only a few analysts got trained, and so the test scripts aren't being well maintained over time. So because they're not being well maintained, people are looking to take things out rather than put things in. So from a informatics perspective, you want more steps in the scripts so that subject matter experts can help with testing, especially if you're implementing new workflows that impact a significant group like nursing. And so obviously when you do something like ClearVia and it's impacting a huge number of people and you have scripts that are very skeleton in nature, it makes it hard to bring people into test, especially when they haven't been trained yet. So that was one of the whole premises of Transit is get the workflows documented once with details and pull those into test scripts. And so over time, and when the testing coordinator changes and changes and changes, you know, over the years, people sort of move away from that. And so CAMC in particular is they do most of their test scripts in Excel and re-upload them each time, as opposed to actually using workflows in Transit. So was that close to your problem, Tina, or not?
Yes, it is. So it was, Kim, when you mentioned workflows and it is the whole thing.
Right.
For example, I just went over all of the ICD-10 codes that we are using. Those are not, they tested it with screenshots and not in a test script. So when we're doing the upgrade, there's not a test script for a physician to go in and put the ICD-10 codes and the nurses to see that these problems have been suggested. And that's a big problem within my organization.
So here's my suggestion to you, Tina, and I'm actually going to send it in writing to CAMC sometime this week. So you guys are going forward with your merger, and with your merger, there's going to be a huge amount of testing that needs to take place, which is what Kate just went through at Concord. And so, and so my recommendation is that you build the cost of updating your test scripts into that merger project that's going to have a bigger budget than other things will have. And so if during that project, you make sure that your test scripts get updated with good workflows, and we make sure people get the appropriate training, because right now it's it's Joy who's trying to manage it all by herself with somebody coming in and telling her, let's strip out all these details you've put in. So that would be my suggestion, is try to get it incorporated into a big project.
Yeah, for us, we just redid, like we just revamped some like what I would call our basic integration testing scripts, and like we had to put some energy and some effort into it. We rebuilt them all basically, but they're reusable ones, right? And the intent is for them to stay exactly like they are for the purpose that they are. So they're targeted test scripts. Like we have test scripts that are targeted for domain validation. We have ones that are targeted for integrated testing. And then the next step will be to incorporate even more of the CI type workflows into it, right? So that we can make sure that the education piece of nursing is also incorporated into our test scripts, if that's what you want to call it. And it's taken the team. They've been working on it for about the last 7 months, and we're just at a place now where we can actually use them, let's say.
Yeah, we're sort of working on things as well for how to help store the data in transit, and hopefully in the next couple months we'll present that at the transit virtual user group. So you remember when you did your Cerner implementations and they had everything in Workflow Designer, and because it wasn't really able to be tracked successfully in there, most people export it out of there into Excel to track which workflows have been approved and all those other kinds of things, and whether or not you've got test scripts for them. So we're starting to use transit plans for tracking some of those things so that you'd be able to go in and determine which workflows were in, in good shape in transit and had content there. But hopefully, like I said, in a couple months or so, we'll be presenting that at the transit virtual user group. It is different when you go live with a new system. So, with your merger at Concord and your coming merger at CAMC, you need to have more integration test scripts because you're also at the same time trying to teach people entirely new workflows versus the integration test scripts that you use for your yearly Cerner upgrade. So you do need to do what Kim said and get to a consolidated group of test scripts that represent the broad workflow and make sure that those test scripts are all modular in nature, have great workflows in them, so that as workflows get tweaked with your new functionality that comes with each release, it's easy to go and update them and maintain them. Versus when you're going live with, several new sites or whatever it is, when they're big projects like that, you need to have usually more workflows that cover more discharge diagnoses. So anyway, so Kate, you sparked discussion.
I was gonna say, wow. I mean, if anybody needs any help from like a workflow perspective of like how we handled the merger with our test scripts, I mean, I'm more than happy to share our experiences. I think when we used our integrated test scripts, they went really well for the merger. And we put a lot of work into them as well, and we kind of devised a plan going forward to keep them going and updated. So more than happy to share. I know this isn't, I have a lot to say in 10 minutes, but yeah, if anybody wants more information on that, they can feel free to reach out.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Does anyone else have anything for today, or? Okay, well, I'll try to get minutes out, and I saw, Tina, you sent me the presentation. I'll make sure the rest of the group gets that as well. Also, as usual, the whole discussion was taped, and so it'll be up on our website within. It actually will probably take a couple weeks before I post it this time, but it will be up there for anyone to go back to and review if they'd like. Thank you very much for joining today, everybody. And the next meeting for this group then is scheduled to be on November the 2nd. And originally, Brian had Holly as a presenter, and I'm not sure what the topic was. So I'll have Brian reach out to Holly when he gets back from vacation to confirm whether or not that, because typically we do one meeting where it's just roundtable discussion and another one where it's a presentation. But because the presentation had been moved off for so long, I asked Tina to present today. So we'll see if that actually ends up being a presentation or if it's just a open discussion. But thank you for joining everyone today. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, you too.
Bye.
Thank you.